Hi, fourth graders. Back today outside again because it's still so nice out. So when we left off in our book, we had just met Jake Terranova. So chapter 17, told by Mr. Kermit. The Good Bunny's chart is mocking me. No matter where I am in the room, my eyes are drawn to the bright pink poster board with its white puffy tails. Even at my desk, when I can't see it, I sense it behind me. Knowing it's there is almost as bad as looking at it. As great as the temptation may be, I can't bring myself to throw it out. Emma keeps finding excuses to come over and check on it. She's frustrated that no one is earning any puffy tails. She's determined to stick with the teaching style that worked with her kindergarten class last year. Her mother was like that, 100% headstrong when she believed she was right. Middle schoolers won't excel for that kind of infantile reward system, and these particular middle schoolers wouldn't excel if you put 10,000 volts to the soles of their feet. The only thing that motivates them, apparently, is the prospect of dumping mass quantities of vuvuzelas into the river. But that's another story, and a much more bizarre one. I don't like to think about that. There are some questions that should never be answered. My new habit is to get to class before the kids. That way I can be finished with the New York Times crossword puzzle by the time they arrive. Just because the school saddled me with the worst class in the district doesn't mean I have to pass that disrespect on to the students. They deserve better. Some of them. One or two. And anyway, all of them jumped into the river when they thought their teacher was drowning. That says something. I'm still not sure what. As I spread the newspaper out, I have to push the toilet bowl to the edge of the desk, which sends some paper skittering to the floor. A couple of weeks ago, I would barely have noticed. But now that this place looks sort of like a real classroom, it's worth a little effort to keep things neat. If not, one of these days Emma might show up with a Clean Bunny's poster board, and this one will have the name Zachary. Ooh, sorry. Will have the name Zachary on it. I'm about to toss the papers when I recognize the first page. It's one of my old worksheets, accompanied by 4 additional pages of neat handwriting. Kiana Rubini reads the name at the top. I remember her handing in something like this, and come to think of it, she's always been a little less out to lunch than the rest of them. I scan a few lines. It's an essay of all things, and it seems to be pretty well written. I read on, drawn in by her compelling sentences and well-constructed arguments about mass transit. She's really enthused about the subject, and she expresses herself beautifully. What's she doing in SCS 8? This is brilliant work. Any teacher would be delighted to receive an essay like this. Why, back when I was first starting out, my vision clouds. That was a long time ago when teaching was more than a job. It was a sacred mission. I was young and stupid then, and I vowed never again to make the mistake of caring about the students. I cared about Jake Terranova once. Look where that got me. On the other hand, it isn't Kiana's fault that Terranova went into business selling exams. It won't be breaking the promise I made to myself to give her the feedback she deserves for a fantastic piece of work. So later, when the students arrive, I return her paper. Written across the top is A+, excellent. She's surprised at first, then thrilled. It triggers more long-suppressed memories. Well-deserved praise, pride, and satisfaction. Motivated teacher, motivated student. Then she asks the question I expect the least. Do I get a puffy tail? Why would Good Bunnies even be on the radar screen of someone capable of writing such a top-notch essay? But I reply, sure, why not? As I attach the Velcro puffy tail next to her name on the chart, I have the undivided attention of every soul in that classroom. If I'd taken out a sword and knighted the girl, it couldn't have been a bigger event. Barnstorm raises a crutch. How come she gets one of those things? What about the rest of us? She wrote an essay, I explain. If you want a puffy tail, you have to work for it. Not necessarily, Parker pipes up. Miss Fountain says you can also get one for being a helpful hare. I drive my Grams to the senior center every day. If that's not helpful, what is? So he gets a puffy tail too. That opens the floodgates. I loaded the dishwasher after dinner last night. I did blue face paint at the Avatar convention. I broke scoring records in 3 sports. I took out the garbage. I award puffy tails like it's going out of style. True, most of these accomplishments aren't very impressive, but puffy tails themselves are so meaningless that it would be hypocritical to raise the standard to earn them. Raheem gets one for staying awake long enough to receive it. Only Aldo can't come up with anything better than, on the bus today, this kid tripped over my book bag and landed in gum. I sighed. That doesn't sound very, helpful to me. Aldo tries again. Well, now it's in his hair and he can't get rid of it. He looks like a doofus. Dude, you could have moved your bag out of his way, Barnstorm pronounces. That's the helpful hair way. Otherwise, you should lose a puffy tail. He's already a 0, Mateo puts in. 0 is better, Aldo explodes, because rabbit butts are stupid. Easy to say when you don't have any, Barnstorm needles. Come on, Aldo, Kiana whispers. You must have done something nice. The boy's still stumped. He sulks for the rest of the day. Just before lunch, Emma looks in, catches sight of the poster board with so many new puffy tails, and beams with pleasure. When I submit the official request for a school bus, Principal Vargas regards me with deep suspicion. She's probably thinking about how many vuvuzelas you can cram into a whole bus. A lot more than 1,000 for sure. I elaborate. It's for a field trip. Field trip? She's amazed. For your kids? Where? We're going to Terra Nova Motors. Speaking those words is even harder than I thought it would be. We've been invited to tour the repair shop. I regurgitate Emma's reasons why this is a good idea. Back up, Zachary. I've known you for a long time. Why would you go anywhere near Jake Terranova? I sigh. Emma found him at some country club shindig. She's a serious busybody, that one. She told him about the Spirit Week kerfuffle and how it dredged up what happened. Now he wants to make amends. The principal folds her arms in front of her. And you want to give him an opportunity to clear his conscience? It's not me. I admit it's the kids. They came alive when he walked into the room. They consider him some kind of celebrity. Listen, Christina, I know they're awful, but what we did to them is just as awful. Are we really going to keep them cooped up like prisoners until they can be the high school's headache? If there's a chance for them to have a real education, we have to take it. And if that means Jake Terranova, then so be it. She looks at me for an uncomfortably long moment. The last time I heard words like that, they came from a young teacher I used to work with. A teacher named Zachary Kermit. That person is gone forever, I assure her, and he's never coming back, which is a good thing because he was an idiot. All right, you've got your bus. The principal scribbles a signature on the requisition form and leans back in her chair, her expression sober. One more thing, Zachary. You've probably already noticed that Dr. Thaddeus isn't exactly your biggest fan. Well, the vuvuzelas didn't do anything to change that. I don't lose sleep over what he thinks. That's mostly because I have such terrible insomnia that there isn't much sleep for me to lose, but I don't mention that to Christina. You didn't hear this from me, she persists, but I think he's going to try to go after your early retirement. I shrug. He's done it already. I know why I got saddled with the Unteachables. He wants me to quit. He'll see his own ears first. There's another way, she reminds me grimly. One wrong step and he'll fire you. Don't give him cause. I'll protect you as much as I can, but I'm not the superintendent. He is. And never underestimate how much power that gives him. I nod, take the bus authorization, and get out of there. It's the cheating scandal still haunting me after all these years. Thaddeus will never forgive me for it. I thought Jake Terranova was back. Correction. He never left. Chapter 18, told by Kiana Rubini. Top 4 reasons why my half-brother Chauncey is like Vladimir. 1. The smell. Dirty diapers and baby puke, enough said. Vladimir's terrarium after the weekend is no perfume factory either. 2. The noise. Chauncey's howling has the edge in volume, but Vladimir's high-pitched squeaks are even more piercing. It goes without saying that both of them are spoiled by too much attention. That's stepmonster's fault in Chauncey's case. For Vladimir, it's Miss Fountain's 7th graders, and lately us. When he wants somebody to feed him a dead cricket, which is all the time, the cheeping and chirping are at a frequency that feel like a miniature blender at the center of your brain. Number 3, the teeth. They both have 0. Okay, Vladimir probably has more than that, but you don't know they're there until he nips you. And to be fair, Chauncey does have a couple of chompers breaking through, bottom front. It's pretty cute, actually. Number 4, the time suck. That's the biggest similarity between them. Dealing with Chauncey is a 25-hour-per-day job, mostly for Stepmonster, but also for Dad and me. If you leave him alone for 10 seconds, he'll find a way to stick his drool-covered finger into an electric outlet, light himself on fire, and roll down at least 1 flight of stairs. Vladimir is every bit as impossible to ignore. When he starts squeaking, you go running. And he's not satisfied with just anybody. These days, the attention he craves is from Aldo. Leave it to Vladimir to love the least lovable person in the whole school, except maybe Elaine. Maybe it's the red hair. It's hard to ignore. Anyway, I shouldn't really complain that Stepmonster is so distracted. If it wasn't for Chauncey, she might call up to the school and ask how I'm doing and get told, Kiana who? The last thing I need is to get put in regular classes and have to break in 8 new teachers, just when I'm starting to get the hang of Mr. Kermit. Now that Ribbit's doing real teaching, I don't even have to make things up when Dad and Stepmonster ask how's school. I have something to tell them. There are things going on in room 117, things beyond worksheets and crossword puzzles. Hang on a sec, back up. My father stops me at dinner. What are these puffy tails you keep talking about? Some kind of science unit? Right, I stammer. Animal anatomy. If you're going to be dissecting some poor little bunny, I don't want to hear about it. Stepmonster puts in, shoveling strained bananas into Chauncey's waiting mouth. And we're going on that field trip tomorrow, remember? I move on quickly. To a rabbit laboratory? Dad asks. No, this is different. We're going to Terra Nova Motors as Jake Terra Nova's personal guest. I don't know what we're supposed to learn there, but the class is actually pretty psyched about it. One of the downsides of being an SCS 8, besides the obvious, is that you're stuck in the same room all day, so the change of scenery will do us good. Our two chaperones are Mr. Kermit and Miss Fountain. Mr. Kermit has no choice, but it's really nice of Miss Fountain to volunteer, since her own class have to have a sub today. As it turns out, they get Mrs. Landsman, a.k.a. Dawn of the Dead. Poor Vladimir. If he squeaks too loud, she'll probably gut him with a protractor and barbecue him on a rotating spit in the home and careers room. The bus is just a minibus, and it's pretty comfortable with the whole class packed into one side and Elaine all by herself on the other. Aldo is getting mad because Barnstorm keeps thumping the back of his seat with one of the crutches. It doesn't bother Raheem, though. He falls asleep as soon as we make the right turn out of the school driveway. Mateo stands in the aisle, knees bent, working on his balance, just like the Silver Surfer from Spider-Man. Miss Fountain seems pretty uncomfortable with the bad behavior, and especially the fact that Mr. Kermit isn't saying anything, so she tries to change the subject by talking about how SCS8 should participate in the district science fair. She's always coming up with suggestions for our class, like the Good Bunnies thing, or inviting us for circle time, or to help out with Vladimir. Sometimes Mr. Kermit lets her push him around a little, but not today. No, he says simply. I think this field trip has put him in a bad mood. It's pretty obvious that Jake Terra Nova isn't his favorite person. But it's a fantastic competition, Miss Fountain persists. Teams enter from every school in the district. There are prizes, and the first place winners get an extra 10% added to their grades on the state science assessment. It's a win-win. Not for us, Mr. Kermit replies firmly. His expression says it all. Do these really look like the kind of kids who will come in first place at anything? It bugs me a little. Not that I'm dying to get mixed up in any science fair, me being a short-timer, but I'm used to Mr. Kermit sticking up for us, not writing us off. Maybe it's part of his bad mood. The other kids talk about Jake Terra Nova like he's some kind of superstar. As we pull up to Terra Nova Motors, I finally understand why. It has to be the biggest car dealership I've ever seen. And that includes LA, where everything is kind of supersized. Mr. Kermit's ex-student owns all this? That's pretty cool, especially when Mr. Terra Nova himself comes out to welcome us. Hey guys, glad you could make it. Come on inside. Like we're longtime friends, not random middle schoolers getting our moment with the big boss. We tour the showroom first, which I have to admit is pretty fun. All the vehicles are shiny new and top of the line. We try out every seat in every car, front, back, and third row, and even climb into the payloads of the pickups. For the first time since blundering into SCS 8, I feel like I could be with any class of kids in the country, not Greenwich Middle School's dreaded Unteachables. Ribbit sees it too. His bloodshot eyes are half open instead of the usual 25%. Or maybe he's just on the alert because Mr. Terra Nova is here, and this is enemy territory. Miss Fountain, the Prius driver, is looking disapprovingly at the giant SUVs and light trucks that dominate the showroom when Mr. Terra Nova walks up to her. I'm wondering if she's going to lecture him on the environment. Instead, she says, "This is a wonderful thing you're doing. I don't know if you can tell, but some of these kids have special issues." You think? His grin is irresistible. My floor manager just pulled a sleeper out of the trunk of that Cadillac. That's Raheem, Miss Fountain explains. He doesn't get enough sleep at home, but he's a talented artist, sensitive and observant. They've got their quirks. They're good kids, though. Okay, maybe good is too strong a word. Gotcha. He's watching Barnstorm poking tires with his crutches. Hey, Mr. Terra Nova, Parker approaches. I want to take the red Mustang out for a test drive. Right, very funny, kid. No, really, I have a license. Parker digs a mangled ID out of the pocket of his jeans. It's a provisional license, Parker, Miss Fountain reminds him gently. This is 100% farm business, Parker promises. I just remembered I've got to swing home and pick up a load of turnips for the Safeway. Looking for a lifeline, she calls out, Mr. Kermit, I think it's time for lunch. It's hard to get a handle on what Ribbit thinks of all this. On one hand, it's obvious that he can't stand his former student because of what happened in the past. On the other, that must have been forever ago. Mr. Terra Nova was a 7th grader, even younger than we are. He's an adult now, running a big business, and he's trying to make amends. Why can't Mr. Kermit see that? We brought bag lunches, but Mr. Terra Nova ordered pizza for everybody in the dealership dining room. Only Ribbit turns him down, like anything from his old nemesis would turn to poison as soon as it enters his mouth. The employees are really friendly, and we get to ask them questions. I want to know about fuel efficiency standards. Barnstorm wants to know, when you sell a car, do you get to keep the money? Aldo asks the lease specialist, how long did it take to grow that mustache? Elaine gets into the cookie platter set aside for Customer Appreciation Week. After lunch, we tour the service department. That's where the field trip starts to get really good. Motor vehicles are such a huge part of life, especially in a place like LA, where you have to drive pretty much everywhere. People take it for granted that their cars will work, like they're powered by some kind of magic. How often do we ever take a peek under the hood at the machinery that makes it happen? Mr. Terranova leads us onto a raised catwalk, and we can look down on at least a dozen vehicles on lifts in various stages of being taken apart and put back together again. The noise is a cacophony of revving engines, pneumatic tools, and the clang of metal on metal. The smell is a mix of oil and grease, with a little bit of exhaust, whatever the ventilation fans miss. Yet there's almost a kind of grace to it, and a rhythm that's hard to resist. It feels productive, like necessary work is being done. Parker is practically drooling, and even Aldo is leaning over the railing, fascinated. It's the first time I've ever seen him interested in something, and he looks older and more mature. Mateo is babbling about how the shop reminds him of the engine room of the USS Enterprise on Star Trek. Raheem is sketching furiously on a napkin from the lunchroom. Elaine is watching in rapt attention while double-fisting stolen cookies from her jacket pockets. Suddenly, she clutches the rail in distress. For a second, I wonder if she's trying to hype her reputation by ripping it free from the catwalk. But no. Her cheeks are pink, her eyes terrified. Sharp staccato choking sounds reach me over the clamor of the shop. Mr. Kermit pounds her on the back, but to no avail. I run up behind Elaine and reach around her to perform the Heimlich maneuver, positioning my hands below the rib cage like they told us in life-saving class back in California. Once, twice, no good. 3 times. "Heads up!" bellows a wild voice. I glance over my shoulder just in time to see a crutch hurtling toward me in a home run swing. I drop to the metal floor of the catwalk a split second before the wooden shaft would have taken my head off. It slams across Elaine's broad back and, with a thud that momentarily drowns out the noisy shop, splits in 2. Everybody waits for her to crumple to the catwalk unconscious, but that's not what happens. Elaine doesn't even flinch. Instead, a chunk of cookie comes flying out of her mouth. It sails over the rail and drops into the half-disassembled motor of a vintage Corvette. The mechanics look up in horror. "What was that?" Mr. Terranova asks urgently. I confirm that Elaine is no longer choking. "She's okay." The car dealer looks at me like I'm totally missing the point. "But what did she spit in the engine?" Elaine smacks her lips. "I think it was a ginger snap." The word is like a panic alarm to Jake. "Guys," he calls down to his team, "I want that engine taken apart and every piece wiped clean now." I'm mystified. What's so bad about a ginger snap? "Sugar," he explains in agony. "It's the last thing you want in a car engine. It dissolves in the gas and ends up everywhere. If word gets around that I sold a car with a sugared tank, I'm finished in this business." Mr. Kermit is beaming from ear to ear. It's the first time we've ever seen him so happy, and what did it take? Problems for Jake Terranova. I actually feel a little guilty. I saw Elaine pocketing those cookies and kept my mouth shut. I may be a short-timer, but you don't have to be at our school very long to know that Elaine rhymes with pain. The field trip breaks up soon after that. Mr. Terranova is focused on the Corvette, so he's not playing host anymore. Plus, Barnstorm is complaining about his mobility with only one crutch. "Then you shouldn't have busted the other one over Elaine's head," Aldo tells him. "It was her back, not her head," Barnstorm retorts. "I saved her life, man. She'd better remember that while deciding who her next victim's going to be." "You just cost yourself a puffy tail, Buster," Mr. Kermit snaps. Barnstorm is bitter. "No fair. I save a life and I'm out a crutch and a puffy tail? What kind of justice is that?" "He should earn a puffy tail for helping and lose it for being mean," Parker puts in. "At least then he breaks even." "We should all get a puffy tail except Elaine," Aldo reasons truculently. "You know, for not barfing a cookie into that Corvette." This seems to be his idea of fairness. Elaine tosses a mild glance in Aldo's direction, and he decides to stand on the other side of a tall cargo van. It's too bad that such a great field trip has to end on a down note. But by then, the minibus is waiting outside, so there's nothing to do but get on it. Halfway back to school, Miss Fountain gets a call on her cell phone. It's the dealership. There's a middle school boy asleep on the couch in the showroom. Mr. Kermit does a head count. "It's Raheem," he reports. "We have to go back and get him." And we turn around. Wait, I frown at Miss Fountain. How come they called you? I mean, why does Jake Terranova have your phone number? She blushes the color of Chauncey's diaper rash. Why would Jake Terranova have her phone number? How weird. I will be back with more tomorrow, friends. Bye.